Hello, and welcome to Replay Value. Hyoka's 6th episode is not its 5th. And what I mean by that extremely obvious statement is that Hyoka's 5th episode is my favorite, and I would argue that it's the realization of the platonic ideal at the core of Hyoka. Episode 6 is not that, and someone, me for example, might overlook it in the same way that one would think that a delicious meal is simply mediocre after tasting food of the gods. But after some reflection, they'd realize that what they'd initially overlooked was actually quite good in its own right. And so let's use episode 6 as not only a palate cleanser for a fantastic episode 7 and upcoming arc, but also analyze it on its own merits, what it sets up, what it confirms, and how it does so. Episode 6 gives us the prelude to the mystery by having Hotaro bored listening to his history lecture, a discussion about Roman society and breaking down class distinctions, before snapping to attention as he hears the teacher next door berate his students, and hearing Chitanda's voice rise to match. After the OP, we join the Classics Club with Mayaka berating Satoshi, presumably for making plans to hang out and then ditching, which Hyoka uses as an opportunity to use the cinematography through the camera shake and tight framing to highlight how energetic Mayaka and Chitanda are in comparison to Hotaro, who's shown unmoving and with a stable frame. Chitanda is relentless, as usual, in her attempt to break up the conflict, but she has to rely on Hotaro yet again, who actually doesn't speak much in this segment, mostly thinking through snarky comments to himself, but acquiescing to Chitanda's wordless request by asking simply, Notably, Hotaro isn't saying to give Satoshi a break, but rather suggesting that she deserves one, which makes Satoshi's thumbs up to Hotaro, as he thinks towards Satoshi, that wasn't for you, a great triple whammy. Of him looking out for himself, getting Chitanda off his back, for Chitanda's sake, this is what she wanted, as well as looking out for Mayaka, who he probably thinks is in the right given how Satoshi's embarrassed smile and lack of response kinda points to him being at fault. What I particularly dig about this small interaction though is how it shows that while Mayaka outwardly teases Hotaro, she respects his opinion and sees him as someone level-headed. Maybe too level-headed compared to her very expressive personality. This angry outburst leads to the group making observations about each other, both in the context of anger and in the larger context of the 7 deadly sins. The first is about Satoshi, who Chitanda notes doesn't get angry, which Mayaka and Hotaro immediately disagree with. Satoshi states that it's rarer and he isn't as expressive with his anger as Mayaka is, but he does get angry, leading Hotaro to say, which suggests that Hotaro also sees the facade/underlying truth element about Satoshi that I've alluded to multiple times previously and will be built upon properly later in the show. The second is how Mayaka jokes about Hotaro not getting angry because he's barely human, to which Hotaro gets angry in his own head and is almost surprised and satisfied by that outcome. This again is in line with that rose-colored versus gray emotional spectrum realization that we spoke about earlier. Hotaro just isn't as expressive as the others. And that brings us to the discussion of the 7 deadly sins, though neither the Full Metal nor Melodious and crew incarnations, where Mayaka and Satoshi tease Chitanda about being perfect, calling her Saint Eru, which leads to her getting mildly angry with a top-tier pout. Chitanda has a much more level-headed approach to the sins, stating that you need some aspects of them in your daily life. Without pride, you can't have self-respect, for example. This eventually leads to Hotaro asking Chitanda if she was the one who got angry in class earlier, inciting the trademark "I'm curious" and endless eye contact as Hotaro begrudgingly accepts the request. We get to the mystery, which is most simply broken down as, why did the math teacher make a mistake about where Chitanda's class was in the textbook? Just an aside, I really like the style that was chosen for the visualization. It gives a sense of mindless repetition with the test dummies and a sense of a stage play with the masks. It's clumsy in the construction, but emotive in the execution, and that's basically a one-to-one impression of the kind of character Chitanda is as far as the story to this point is concerned. The physical aspects aren't important, the emotional states are. After the story, we get this fun shot where Satoshi is framed inside a cookie as we learn that he failed his midterms and foreshadow that he'll have to make them up. It's a long winding road of dead ends and getting called stupid, but we eventually get the important piece of data from Satoshi, who reveals that his class, Class D, has gotten to the point in the textbook where Omichi, the teacher, asked for Chitanda's class, Class A, to pick up. And this is the greatness of the trick, especially in a visual medium. Every time we're shown the class entrances, we see uppercase letters. In the explanation, we see uppercase letters, and you would naturally assume uppercase letters because when they're standalone, that's usually how they're featured. Even as Satoshi's trying to work it out, he grabs the cookies with the uppercase A and D. But notably, Hotaro doesn't grab A and D, but R and P. And that's because you're being tricked into thinking along the same lines as Satoshi, Mayaka, and Chitanda. Hyoka has played with your expectations and reinforced those expectations through the visuals earlier in the episode, which makes the reveal of the lowercase letters, like variables in math, a great narrative trick. It isn't impossible to solve yourself, it just requires your perspective to not be locked into the path that the show desired you to stay on. And the show reminds you that lowercase is the preferred case for math when it shows the blackboard in the flashback. And frankly, I love that about this mystery. It's misdirection based on our societal understanding as opposed to data provided by the story. As for why Chitanda got mad, which is the corollary to the mystery, well, that answer isn't apparent at all, and it's definitely not supposed to be. In fact, Mayaka asks several questions about it, which Chitanda negatively responds to before stating, after the mystery is solved, Hotaro thinks to himself that Chitanda likely never wants to get angry and would rather have it be her own fault than due to someone else's. So in this case, she wanted Omichi to have his reasons and for her to have been in the wrong, rather than the reality of what happened. The larger question then, is this naivete, wishing to assume the best of people, or maybe a preference to be solely responsible for how one's emotional state fluctuates? If you got through the previous 5 episodes thinking that Chitanda was a simple character, like Hotaro seemed to imply in episode 2, then you're in for a shock on this one. This episode confirms, if the previous ones hadn't already, especially episode 5, that she's definitely not an airhead, and as Hotaro says here, how many times has Chitanda done something completely unexpected? It would be prideful for him to think that he understands her, especially as we're shown how they occupy completely different worlds in this dual shot. That in turn suggests that Hotaro's reading on Chitanda isn't the definitive truth. We're going to have to watch along and draw our own conclusions about her in the future. So the answer to what made Chitanda mad, just as her emotional state had been in the Sekitani June arc, is the true mystery of episode 6, and a hanging one without a definitive answer. Maybe that is part of the reason why Hotaro views the day as wasted, having not finished his book nor coming to the truth, as we reinforce our gray and rose-colored duality before he closes the door on the question of why the math teacher messed up as we end the episode.